Hello, my friend, and welcome back to Sleepy Shelf with Oliver. If you are hearing my voice, it means the day is finally over. The world outside may be rushing, but in here, time stands still. The night is quite peaceful tonight, isn't it? But you don't need to worry about the cold, the wind, or the endless thoughts trying to keep you awake. You are safe now, hidden away in this forgotten village. The moon is glowing, the heavy curtains are drawn, and I have a quiet tale waiting just for you. So, sink into your pillows, close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath, and let the moonlight wash the world away. Part 1. The Silver Road arrives. The road appears before you slowly, the way all the most beautiful things in this world tend to appear. Not all at once, but gently, gradually, like a whispered secret that the night has been saving just for you. It is a cobblestone road. Old, very old. The kind of old that no longer bothers to announce itself. That simply is. The way mountains are, the way the smell of rain on dry earth simply is. Each stone is rounded at its edges, worn smooth by the passage of centuries of soft footsteps and cartwheels and the unhurried hooves of horses who no longer exist anywhere but in the most peaceful corners of memory. The stones are gray in the daylight, perhaps, but it is not daylight now. Now, each stone carries upon its back a coat of the most extraordinary silver, the silver of the full moon which hangs above you, enormous and impossibly still, like a paper lantern that someone has strung between the stars and simply forgotten to take down. You stop for a moment. You simply stand and you breathe and you look up at it, the moon. It is so full tonight, so extraordinarily, quietly full. Not harsh in the way that artificial lights are harsh, not demanding the way that screens and cities and noise are demanding. The moonlight asks nothing of you. It simply falls. It falls the way snow falls, the way sleep falls, without hurry, without drifting down through the cool September air and settling across everything it touches with the softest imaginable silver weight. It settles across your shoulders. It settles across your hands, which hang loosely at your sides. It settles across the cobblestones and across the ancient hedgerows that line the road on either side, and across the tops of the great dark trees that stand beyond those hedgerows, like patient, enormous sentinels who have been standing here since before this road had a name. You take a step forward. The cobblestone makes the softest, most satisfying sound beneath your foot. A gentle, resonant tap. A small percussion in the enormous quiet of the night. And then another step and another tap, and you find yourself walking slowly, so slowly, down this silver road, deeper into wherever it is that you are going. The air here is cool, not cold, not biting, simply cool in the way that September nights in old, sheltered places are cool. A freshness that moves gently over the skin of your arms and throat, like a cloth that has been kept in a drawer beside lavender and cedar. You breathe it in, deep. You hold it for just a moment in your chest. This clean, moonlit air, this air that smells faintly of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke and something green and ancient that you cannot quite name, but that your body recognizes immediately, instinctively, as safe, as home. You let the breath go slowly, and with it, you let go of something else, something tightly held, something you have been carrying for longer than you perhaps realized. It leaves you quietly and dissolves into the night. The trees on either side of the road begin to lean inward overhead. Elm trees these, enormous ones, their trunks as wide as old chimneys, their bark deeply furrowed in long vertical lines that the moonlight traces with silver fingers. Their branches interweave above you in the most extraordinary canopy. Not a ceiling exactly, more like lacework. Like the kind of fine, dark lacework that a Victorian lady might have kept folded carefully in a box, and which, when held up to the light, reveals itself to be full of small, perfect holes through which the light comes filtering. And the moonlight comes filtering through the branches above you exactly like that, in small, luminous patches that shift and breathe as the branches sway very gently in the breeze. The breeze. Let us talk about the breeze for a moment, because it deserves attention. It comes from somewhere to the west. You can tell by the way it moves across your left cheek, the way it lifts the very ends of your hair with an almost courteous sort of tenderness. It is not a strong breeze. It is barely a breeze at all, if you want to be precise about it. It is more like the suggestion of a breeze, a slow, meandering exhale from some sleeping giant beyond the hills, carrying with it the damp smell of meadow grass and the very faintest trace of something floral, something that might once have been roses in a garden somewhere to the west, now past their bloom, but still releasing the last of their softened fragrance into the night. The elm leaves respond to it with the quietest possible sound, a rustling, a dry, papery, whispering rustle that passes through the canopy above you like a slow wave, starting somewhere to your right and moving across the road to your left, fading, returning, fading again. It is the sound of 10,000 small, sleepy conversations occurring simultaneously and meaning nothing in particular and requiring absolutely nothing from you. You let the sound wash over you. You let it pass through you the way water passes through cupped hands, touching everything, held by nothing, gone softly. And then you see it at the far end of the elm corridor, where the trees part like theater curtains. The road opens into a wider space, and in that wider space, there stands, bathed so completely in moonlight that it seems almost to generate its own pale glow from within. A village, a forgotten village. You can tell it is forgotten because of the quality of its stillness. There are towns that are asleep, and there are towns that have been forgotten, and they feel entirely different from one another. An asleep town still hums faintly with the sense of all those lives inside it, all those warm bodies and dreaming minds just behind the darkened windows. A forgotten town has a different kind of quiet, a deeper kind. The quiet of a thing that the world has simply misplaced, slipped between the pages of some enormous old book, and left there, pressed flat and perfect, while everything else rushed on ahead. This village has been misplaced, and you are so grateful for it. You stand at the edge of the elm corridor and look at it. The road widens here into something that, in daylight, might be called a lane, a broad, gentle lane of silver cobblestones that curves slightly to the right, following the line of some long-forgotten field boundary beneath the grass. On either side of the lane, the buildings begin. Cottages, most of them, built of the local stone, a warm, yellowish limestone that the moonlight transforms into something that looks very nearly like carved ivory. The rooftops are steep and old, their slates dark and slightly mossy at the eaves, their chimney stacks rising against the sky in narrow, dignified columns. No smoke rises from any chimney tonight. The fires have all been out for a very long time. The windows of the cottages are dark, but they are not empty looking. There is something about the way the moonlight falls across them, across the small, thick panes of old glass, each pane slightly warped, slightly uneven in the way that old handmade glass is always slightly warped and uneven. That makes the darkness inside them feel inhabited by something other than absence, by quiet, by rest, by the accumulated peace of all the years that have settled inside these walls and remained there undisturbed. You take a step into the lane. As he worked, his eye fell upon a particular shelf near the back of the shop, slightly above his usual line of sight. On this shelf, among other toys that had accumulated over the years, stood a small wooden soldier. It was an old toy, very old, older than most of the pieces in the shop. The paint had faded until the soldier's red coat was more pink than scarlet, and his black boots had grayed with time. One arm was raised in a permanent salute, and his face, though simple, bore an expression of solemn dignity. Mr. Bellamy saw this soldier every morning as he tidied his workshop, and every morning he paused, just for a moment, his eyes resting on that small figure. He never moved it, never took it down to examine it, never offered it for sale, though customers occasionally inquired about the older toys on the upper shelves. It remained where it had been placed many years ago, and he could not have said exactly why he kept it there, could not have explained the small tightening in his chest when he looked at it, or the way his hand sometimes lifted slightly as if to reach for it, before falling back to his side. This morning was no different. He paused, he looked, his expression grew distant for just a moment, and then he turned away and continued with his preparations. The shop was ready now, or nearly so. The floor was swept, the lamps were burning, the tools were arranged, the toys were in their places. Mr. Bellamy moved to the door and unlocked it, turning the key with a practiced twist, then pulled it open just slightly. He did not expect customers at this early hour. It was barely 6:30, but he liked to leave the door ajar, to allow the sounds of the street to enter, to signal that the shop was awake and alive, even if not yet fully open for business. The cobblestone sounds beneath your foot, that soft, resonant tap, and the sound moves out ahead of you through the village and fades, absorbed by the old walls and the thick night air, and the enormous, indifferent kindness of the moon. You take another step. The cool air moves across your face again, and the elm leaves whisper behind you, and somewhere very far overhead, a single cloud, thin and translucent as gauze, drifts slowly across the face of the moon, and for a moment softens its light to something even gentler. An ivory light, a pearl light, a light the color of an old page in an old book, before the cloud passes on and the silver returns, full and quiet and absolute. Your shoulders drop, your jaw, which you had not realized was holding any tension at all, releases it now. Your hands, loose at your sides, feel heavy in the most comfortable way, heavy the way your hand feels in a warm bath, weighted by water, belonging to that warmth entirely. You are here. You are safe. You are walking slowly through the forgotten village, and the moonlight is silver on the cobblestones beneath your feet. And there is nowhere else in the world that you need to be tonight. Nowhere at all. You are in exactly the right place. The clock on the far wall marks another slow minute. The station breathes, and somewhere, distantly, a door opens onto a room where the firelight is warm, and the chairs are deep, and the night is long, and nothing is required of you at all. The door he opens for you is small and set deep into the station wall, framed in dark painted timber that has swelled and settled over many winters into a perfect, particular fit. The kind of fit that requires no key, no latch lifting, only the gentle press of a familiar hand. He presses his, and the door opens, and the warmth comes out to meet you like something alive. You step inside. The room is not large. It does not need to be. Its dimensions are precisely what they should be. Wide enough for 2 armchairs before a hearth. Long enough for a counter along one wall. Low enough in the ceiling that the lamplight reaches every corner without effort, filling the room the way warm water fills a cupped palm, completely, easily, all the way to the edges. The ceiling is dark timber, crossed by beams that have blackened gently over decades of coal smoke and pipe smoke and lamp smoke, and the walls are paneled to shoulder height in the same dark wood, smooth and close-grained, polished by the incidental touch of passing hands until they hold a quiet gleam. The stove stands against the near wall. It is a small cast iron thing, squat and serious. Its door set with a mica window through which the fire inside can be seen burning in long, slow pulses, amber deepening to orange, orange to a brief and beautiful red at its heart, then settling again. The coals shift once as you enter. A tiny subsidence, a private rearrangement, and a small shower of sparks drifts upward and vanishes behind the glass. The heat the stove gives off is the best possible kind. Not aggressive, not dry, but gentle and pervasive, filling the room from the floor upward, loosening the cold from your shoulders, the way a long breath loosens tension from the chest. You stand before it for a moment. Your hands, you notice, have unclenched. "Sit, please," the night porter says, setting his lantern on its hook by the door, where it joins 3 others already hanging, all lit, all swaying very slightly from the disturbance of your entrance. Their combined light making the room flicker once, warmly, before settling. He gestures toward the nearer of the 2 armchairs, a deep, tufted thing, upholstered in a fabric that was once perhaps burgundy and has faded over many comfortable years to something closer to the color of dried rose petals, a color that has no precise name but feels immediately and entirely right. You sit. The chair receives you the way a good chair always does, with a small sigh of leather and horsehair, a settling, an accommodation as though it has been waiting in precisely this configuration for precisely you at precisely this hour. Your back finds the curve of the backrest. Your arms find the arms. Your feet, almost of their own will, move closer to the warmth of the stove. You could sleep here. You understand that now, with a clarity that is itself restful. You could sleep here very easily and very well. The night porter moves to the counter. The counter runs the full length of the opposite wall, dark wood polished to the same quiet gleam as the paneling, its surface bearing the collected evidence of a long and careful working life. At the far end, a row of leather-bound ledgers stands in perfect alignment, their spines stamped in faded gilt, years and routes and the names of lines that once carried the world from one side of the country to the other. Beside them, a sheaf of timetables, thick cream-colored paper, folded with precision and stacked with the patient tidiness of someone who knows exactly where everything is and has no need to prove it. A magnifying glass on a brass handle, a pen lying at rest beside an open inkwell, its nib still faintly dark, and the keys. The keys are hanging on a board fixed to the wall above the counter, rows and rows of them, each on its own numbered brass hook, each with its own brass tag engraved with a number too small to read from here. They are every size: long, slender keys for tall doors, small, round keys for desk drawers and clockwork housings, large, weighty keys for the station's outer gates and engine sheds. They hang utterly still in the still air. Each one is a small, contained mystery, a door not yet opened, a room not yet entered. Together, they make a kind of catalog of the possible. From a lower shelf, the night porter lifts a small tin pot, already warm, you realize, as he wraps a cloth around its handle and sets it on the iron trivet beside the stove. From elsewhere on the shelf, 2 thick ceramic cups, cream-colored, rimmed in a thin, dark band, set down on the counter with a satisfying weight. Beside them, a small tin of something. You cannot see the label from here, but the smell that begins to drift across the room as he opens it tells you everything. Something warm and dark and sweetly spiced. Something you have tasted before in some half-remembered winter, in some earlier chapter of yourself. He spoons it slowly. There is no hurry in his movements. There is never any hurry in his movements. Each action is complete in itself. The spooning finished before the pouring begins. The pouring finished before he sets the pot back on the trivet. Each small motion, give it its full duration, and no more. Watching him work is like watching the hands of the station clock move. You know they are moving. You can see that they are moving. But the movement itself is so perfectly measured that it feels almost like stillness. Steam rises from both cups. He carries them across. One offered to you, handle outward. The small courtesy so natural it requires no comment. And settles himself into the other armchair with the ease of a man who has done exactly this. In exactly this chair, on many nights before. His cup rests on the broad arm of the chair. The fire pulses once inside the stove. The mica window glows. You wrap both hands around your cup. The warmth travels inward immediately, up through your palms and into your wrists, moving along your arms with a slow, unhurried thoroughness, as though the warmth itself knows where it is going and sees no need to rush. You drink. It is sweet and dark and faintly spiced with something you cannot quite name. Cardamom, perhaps, or something related to it. Something that has grown somewhere warm and far away and arrived here through a long and patient journey of its own. The taste sits in your mouth for a moment before moving, like the warmth moved. Through you, do many people pass through at this hour? You ask, because the room and the fire and the warmth in the cup have made words feel easy. Not necessary, but easy. The way words feel between people who have known each other a long time. The night porter tilts his head very slightly, considering. More than you might expect, he says. The midnight trains bring all kinds. The early risers, the late finishers, the ones who couldn't sleep at home and found that moving helped. A pause. The coal shifts again in the stove. And sometimes, people who have simply been a long time in motion and need a moment to remember that stopping is also permitted. In case, he says simply with a small, unhurried gesture that means, in case you need one. In case you would like to stay a while. In case the night turns out to be longer and kinder than you expected, and sleep comes before you've had a chance to plan for it. There is no obligation in the gesture, only the gentle acknowledgement that sleep, when it comes, is not something to apologize for. The fire settles. Your cup is 3/4 empty. The warmth in your hands has long since moved into your chest. into the slow, heavy ease of your shoulders, into the particular looseness behind your eyes that means that the night is doing what nights, at their best, are supposed to do. The room hums very softly around you. The stove, the watches, the far and gentle station sounds, the small sounds of two people sitting comfortably together in the amber light, requiring nothing of each other except the pleasure of being quietly present. The night porter says nothing now. He does not need to. Outside, another long breath of steam drifts past the heavy door. The clock, somewhere, marks the quarter hour, a single soft tone, low and round, that arrives and lingers, and then, like all the best things, like the steam, like the sound of footsteps, fading down an empty platform, gently, gracefully lets itself go. Your eyes are heavy. The wool blanket waits, green and patient, on its shelf. And the fire, inside its small iron house, breathes on. The shop was beautiful in candlelight. It always had been. The warm glow softened edges, created depths and shadows that transformed the familiar into something almost magical. This was the shop at its best. Mr. Halbrook thought, not in the bright light of day, when every flaw and worn surface was visible, but in the gentle light of evening, when everything was touched with gold. His eyes rose to the high shelf, to the pale candle that stood there. If that candle could speak, what stories would it tell? What winters had it witnessed? What sorrows and joys had played out beneath its silent gaze? Mr. Halbrook smiled at his own fancy. Candles did not speak, of course. They simply burned, or waited to burn, patient and uncomplaining. And yet, in their burning, they did tell a kind of story. The story of transformation, of substance becoming light and heat. The story of service, of purpose fulfilled through self-consumption. The story of temporary beauty, of illumination that lasted only as long as there was wax to feed it. Every candle was a small story. Some were short stories, burning out in an hour or two. Others were longer, sustaining their light through many evenings. But all of them, eventually, came to their end. That was the nature of candles. That was the bargain they made with the darkness. All except one, perhaps. One that had found a way to burn without burning out, to give light without surrendering substance. One that stood on a high shelf year after year, keeping watch, holding its mystery close. Mr. Halbrook reached up, almost without thinking, his hand extending toward the shelf, but he stopped before touching it. Leave it be, he thought. Leave it in its place. Some things are better observed than analyzed, better wondered about than understood. He lowered his hand and turned away. Outside, the night was deep and cold. Inside, the shop glowed with warm light, and on the high shelf, the pale candle stood in its accustomed place, neither near nor far, neither present nor absent, but something in between. A point of continuity in a changing world, a small anchor against the tide of time. Mr. Halbrook moved toward his room, toward his narrow bed and his night's rest. But before he left the shop, he paused at the threshold and looked back one more time. The candle, unlit, seemed nonetheless to glow with a light of its own, or perhaps it was only reflecting the lights around it, gathering them up and giving them back as it always had, as it always would. "Good night," Mr. Halbrook said softly, to the candle, to the shop, to the accumulated memories of all the winters that had come before. Then he passed through the door, leaving the candles to their vigil, leaving the night to deepen as it would. Part 7. Evening in the workshop. The next day dawned clear and cold, the kind of winter morning where frost painted intricate patterns on every window and breath formed clouds in the air. Mr. Halbrook woke early, as always, and went through his morning rituals with the same quiet efficiency that had characterized his movements for decades. The day passed in its customary rhythm. Customers came and went, fewer than on market days, but steady nonetheless. A clerk from one of the larger houses came to order candles for their employer's Christmas celebrations. Two young men, students by the look of them, purchased tapers for their late-night studying. An elderly woman bought a simple votive candle to light at the cathedral in memory of her departed husband. Each transaction was conducted with courtesy and care. Each customer left with exactly what they needed, wrapped and ready. And between customers, Mr. Halbrook worked in his workshop, preparing stock, maintaining his tools, keeping his hands busy with the work that gave shape to his days. But it was the evening that truly began this part of our story. That time when the day's labor was complete and the shop began its slow transition from place of business to place of rest. The sun was setting behind the western rooftops of York as Mr. Halbrook completed his final sale of the day. He had just finished wrapping a pair of pillar candles for Mr. Weatherby, the bookseller from 2 streets over, and was accepting payment when he noticed the quality of light coming through the window. It was that particular shade of amber that seems to exist for only a handful of minutes each day, when the sun is low enough to paint everything in warm tones, but not yet so low as to surrender the sky to twilight. The light came through the window at a sharp angle, illuminating the dust motes that drifted through the air and turning them into tiny stars. Mr. Weatherby noticed it too. "Beautiful evening," he remarked, pausing at the door with his wrapped package under his arm. "Makes one grateful for windows facing west." Halbrook agreed. Every sunset is a gift, but winter sunsets seem especially fine. Perhaps because they're so brief. Mr. Weatherby nodded and took his leave, the bell chiming his departure. Mr. Halbrook watched him walk past the window, his figure briefly silhouetted against the golden light. And then he was gone, disappeared around the corner. The shop fell quiet. Mr. Halbrook stood for a moment, simply listening to the silence. It was not absolute, this silence. He could hear the settling of the building around him, the distant sound of cartwheels on cobblestones, the faint ringing of church bells marking the hour. But these sounds only deepened the quiet rather than breaking it, the way a single drop of ink makes water more transparent by giving it something to be compared against. He moved to the window and looked out at the street. The sunset was intensifying, the amber deepening to copper and gold. The buildings across the way were transformed by it, their ordinary brick and timber facades becoming something precious, something worth pausing to admire. A few people passed by, hurrying home before full darkness fell. A man with a walking stick, a woman with a basket, 2 children running ahead of their mother, their voices carrying in the cold air. All of them were touched by the sunset light, all of them briefly beautiful. In that particular way, that early evening makes everyone beautiful. Mr. Halbrook turned away from the window and began the process of closing the shop for customers, though not yet for the day. He went to the door and turned the sign that hung there from open to closed. He drew the bolt, not locking it entirely. He might still need to step out, but securing it enough that no one would casually enter expecting to make a purchase. Then he moved through the shop, beginning the evening tasks. Some of the candles that had been burning during the day needed trimming or replacing. He attended to this with his customary care, ensuring that each flame was healthy, each wick at the proper length. As he worked, the light outside continued to change. The copper and gold were fading now, giving way to softer shades of rose and lavender. The sky above the rooftops was turning that particular shade of blue that exists only at dusk. Not quite day, not quite night, but something suspended between the two. When the candles were all properly tended, Mr. Halbrook made his way to the workshop. This was his favorite time to work here, in the evening, when the pressure of potential customers was gone, and he could focus entirely on his craft without interruption. He had left a pot of beeswax melting slowly on the stove earlier in the day, and now he checked its progress. The wax was perfectly liquid, golden and fragrant. He would use it to make some of the smaller votives that were popular this time of year. People liked to cluster them together, creating pools of light on tables and windowsills. But before beginning that work, he needed tea. This had become a ritual over the years, this evening tea in the workshop. It marked the transition from the day's business to the evening's craftsmanship, from work done for others to work done for its own sake. The tea itself was nothing special, the same blend he drank in the morning, prepared in the same way, but the context transformed it, made it taste different somehow. Evening tea in the workshop, with the sunset fading outside and the candles beginning to glow more brightly as the natural light failed. This was one of the small pleasures of his life. He prepared the tea on the small spirit stove he kept in the corner of the workshop, separate from the larger stove used for melting wax. The kettle was already filled with water from the morning, and it heated quickly, beginning its quiet song as the water approached boiling. While he waited, Mr. Halbrook tidied his workspace. He arranged his tools with precision: the dipping rods, the molds, the cutting tools, the measuring implements. Each had its place, and each was returned to that place at the end of every work session. This order was not merely aesthetic, it was practical. A chandler's shop, with its open flames and hot wax, was no place for carelessness. Tools left lying about could be knocked over, could cause accidents. Better by far to maintain rigorous organization. The kettle began to whistle softly. Mr. Halbrook removed it from the heat and prepared his tea, watching as the hot water turned the color of the leaves as steam rose and dispersed. He poured the tea into his cup, a simple earthenware thing, chipped at the rim but still perfectly serviceable, and carried it to his workbench. He set it down carefully, away from his work area but close enough to reach easily, and stood for a moment watching the steam rise in thin, wandering tendrils. The workshop was warm from the stove, and the contrast between the warm air and the cold tea created visible currents, patterns of movement that were there and then gone, impossible to capture or hold. Through the high window, the last of the sunset was visible, just a band of pale gold now, fading even as he watched. Soon, it would be gone entirely, and the night would be complete. Mr. Halbrook sipped his tea. It was too hot still, and he had to be careful not to burn his mouth, but the warmth of it spreading through him was welcome. He felt the tension of the day, such as it was. His days were not particularly tense, beginning to ease from his shoulders and back. This was peace, he thought. This moment, this particular configuration of elements, warm workshop, cooling tea, fading light, the scent of beeswax, and the promise of work to come. This was what he had built his life around. This was what he returned to every evening. Not excitement or novelty or surprise, but this steady, reliable comfort. He thought about the people who had come into his shop that day, the clerk ordering candles for his employer's celebration, the students buying tapers for their studies, the elderly woman purchasing her memorial votive. Each of them had their own lives, their own stories, their own reasons for needing light, and he was privileged to provide that light, to be a small but necessary part of their days. There was satisfaction in that, deep satisfaction, the kind that didn't announce itself loudly, but rather settled in quietly, like snow accumulating on a winter night. The street outside had grown quieter now. The rush of people heading home had passed. Occasionally, someone would still walk by, their footsteps echoing on the cobblestones, but these were individual travelers now, not the stream that had flowed past in the earlier evening. Mr. Halbrook finished his tea and set the cup aside. Time to begin the evening's work. He had votives to make, and the wax was at the perfect temperature. He worked slowly, methodically, pouring the liquid wax into small molds, setting wicks with steady hands. The process was almost automatic after so many years, requiring only a portion of his conscious attention. The rest of his mind was free to drift, to think, to simply be. The workshop settled around him like a familiar coat. The candles burning on the shelves cast their warm glow. The stove radiated its steady heat. The tools lay in their appointed places, ready for use. Everything was as it should be, as it had been, as it would be tomorrow and the day after. Outside, night was falling fully now. The sky had darkened from lavender to deep blue to something approaching black. One by one, lamps were being lit in windows across the city, little points of light appearing in the darkness, each one representing a household, a family, people settling in for the evening. Mr. Halbrook poured another mold, watching as the golden wax filled the small cavity, as the wick centered itself in the liquid. When this wax cooled and hardened, it would be a candle, a small one, true, but complete, capable of giving light, of providing warmth, of serving its purpose. He poured another and another, working in steady rhythm. The workshop was filled with the quiet sounds of his craft, the soft glug of wax pouring, the gentle clink of molds being set aside, the occasional crackle from the stove. Above him, visible if he chose to look up, the high shelf could just be seen through the workshop doorway. And on that shelf, though he could not see it from this angle, the pale candle stood in its place, keeping its vigil, holding its mystery. But Mr. Halbrook did not look up. He was focused on his work, on the task at hand, on the creation of small lights that would burn for a few hours and then be gone, replaced by others, in the endless cycle that was his life and his craft. The evening deepened, the votives multiplied, and in the warm, wax-scented workshop, an old man's hands continued their familiar work, creating light against the darkness, one small candle at a time. Part 8, A Visitor from Long Ago. The following evening brought with it a change in the weather. The clear, cold days had given way to something softer, a low ceiling of clouds that held the warmth close to the earth and promised snow before the week was out. The air had that particular thickness to it, that sense of expectancy that comes before the first real snowfall of winter. Mr. Halbrook had spent the day in quiet productivity. His hands had shaped candles, his mind had wandered its familiar paths, and the hours had passed with the gentle steadiness that characterized all his days. Now, as evening approached, he was in the workshop, cleaning his tools in preparation for tomorrow's work. The bell above the shop door rang, clear and bright in the gathering dusk. Mr. Halbrook set down the tool he had been wiping and made his way to the front of the shop. Through the doorway, he could see a figure standing just inside the entrance, and something about the way the person stood, straight-backed despite evident age, with a stillness that suggested patience and dignity, made him pause for just a moment before stepping forward. As he entered the shop proper, the visitor turned toward him, and Mr. Halbrook found himself looking at a man who might have been anywhere from 70 to 80 years of age. He was tall, or had been before time had begun its slow work of drawing him earthward. His hair was white, his face deeply lined, but his eyes were clear and bright, and they held an expression that Mr. Halbrook could not quite name. Recognition, nostalgia, something gentler than sadness, but touched by the same awareness of time's passage. "Good evening," Mr. Halbrook said, his voice warm but curious. There was something familiar about this man, though he could not immediately place him. "Good evening, Mr. Halbrook," the visitor replied, and his voice too carried that quality of age tempered by vitality. "I wonder if you might have a few minutes to speak with an old customer. I promise not to keep you long from your work." "Of course," Mr. Halbrook said. "Please, sit." He gestured to the chair near the counter, the same chair where Mrs. Ashworth had sat for tea several days before. The visitor settled himself carefully, the way elderly people do when their joints have begun to protest sudden movements. Mr. Halbrook took up his position on the stool behind the counter, waiting with the patience of one who has learned that some things cannot be rushed. The visitor looked around the shop, his gaze moving from shelf to shelf, candle to candle, taking in every detail as though committing it to memory. Or perhaps, Mr. Halbrook thought, as though comparing what he saw now to what he remembered from before. "It hasn't changed," the visitor said finally, and there was wonder in his voice. "All these years, and it's exactly as I remember it. The same shelves, the same arrangement, even the smell, beeswax and tallow," and he paused, breathing deeply. "And something else, time perhaps, or constancy. It's comforting in a world that changes so rapidly." "You've been here before then," Mr. Halbrook said gently, still trying to place the man's face, still searching his memory for the connection he was certain existed. "Oh yes," the visitor said, his eyes now fixed on Mr. Halbrook's face. "Though it's been many years, 60 years in fact, since I last stood in the shop. I was a boy of 9. You would have been, what, 13, 14? Understanding came slowly, like dawn breaking on a cloudy morning." Mr. Halbrook looked more closely at the face before him, trying to see past the lines and years to the features beneath. And then, quite suddenly, he saw it. The shape of the eyes, the particular way the mouth curved when speaking. "William Ashford," he said softly. "Sarah's brother." The visitor, William, smiled, and in that smile, Mr. Halbrook saw the boy he had known 6 decades ago, the younger brother of the girl he had loved and lost. "I wasn't certain you would remember me. I was just a child when you knew our family." "I remember," Mr. Halbrook said, and found that his voice had grown thick with emotion. "You were always underfoot, as I recall, following Sarah and me on our walks, asking questions, making a general nuisance of yourself." William laughed, a sound that held both joy and sorrow. "I worshipped you both, you know. You were so grown up, so serious. And Sarah was the kindest person I ever knew. When she died," he paused, collecting himself. "Well, it's been 60 years, and I still miss her." "As do I," Mr. Halbrook said quietly. They sat in silence for a moment, 2 old men remembering a girl who had been young and vibrant and full of life, whose absence had shaped both their lives in ways large and small. "I left York not long after Sarah's death," William said eventually. "My parents couldn't bear to stay. Too many memories, too much pain. We moved to Liverpool, and I've lived there ever since. built a life, raised a family, grew old. He smiled. The usual progression. And what brings you back to York after all these years? Mr. Halbrook asked. My granddaughter's being married here on Saturday, William replied. Her fiancé is from York, and they wanted to be married in the cathedral. I arrived 2 days ago, and I've been walking the old streets, seeing what's changed and what hasn't, and I found myself drawn here, to this shop. I had to see if it was still here, if you were still here. Still here, Mr. Halbrook confirmed. Still making candles, still keeping the same hours. I suppose I've become something of a fixture, like the buildings themselves. There's honor in constancy, William said. The world needs more of it, I think. Halbrook inclined his head in acknowledgement of the compliment. Then, surprising himself, he asked, Would you like some tea? I was just about to make some for myself. William's face brightened. I would like that very much. Mr. Halbrook prepared the tea as he had for Mrs. Ashworth, with the same care, the same attention to small details. When he returned to the shop, William was standing, looking up at the high shelves with an expression of deep concentration. Mr. Halbrook, he said slowly, that candle there, the pale one on the high shelf. May I ask about it? Halbrook felt a small jolt of surprise. He handed William his tea and then looked up at the candle in question. It's been there for many years, he said carefully. Why do you ask? William was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the candle. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost reverent. Because I remember it, or one very like it. Sarah had a candle. You gave it to her, do you remember? It was for her 17th birthday. You were so nervous wrapping it, presenting it to her. It was pale beeswax, simple and beautiful. She loved it. The memory came flooding back, sharp and clear despite the decades. Yes, he had made a candle for Sarah's 17th birthday, had spent hours on it, making and remaking it until it was perfect, had wrapped it in his best paper, had fumbled through, giving it to her with all the awkward earnestness of a young man in love. She kept it on her windowsill. William continued, his voice distant with memory. She never lit it, said it was too beautiful, too precious. After she died, my mother wanted to light it at her funeral, but we couldn't find it. We searched the house, but it had disappeared. We always wondered what had happened to it. Mr. Halbrook looked up at the candle on the high shelf. Could it be, after all these years? But how? The day before she died, William said quietly, she was feverish, confused. She kept asking for you. My mother finally sent me to fetch you, but you were out making deliveries when I returned without you. Sarah was very upset. She insisted I take the candle, bring it to your shop, leave it for you, she said. He paused, swallowing hard. She said it belonged with you, that it was always meant to be yours. I never received it, Mr. Halbrook said, his voice barely above a whisper. I know, William said. I was 9 years old, grieving and confused. I set out to bring it to you, but the streets were icy, and I fell. The candle went flying. I was so frightened. I'd broken it, ruined Sarah's last wish. But when I found it, it was perfect, unharmed, as though it couldn't be broken. It gave the evening a softness, a suspension, as though you had stepped out of measured time and into something looser and more forgiving. And then you saw it. At first, it was only the light, a warm, deep amber glow spilling beneath a low doorway and out through a window of small, old-fashioned panes, the kind set in lead that caught reflections in a dozen different angles. The light was not like the gas lamps on the main street. It was warmer. It moved. It flickered in the particular living way that only candlelight does, each flame a small and independent creature, breathing and swaying in the invisible currents of a room. From where you stood, perhaps 20 paces away, the window looked like a lantern set into the wall of the building. Something lit from within by something warm and patient and very old. You slowed your steps without meaning to. The building was narrow, tucked between two taller terraces, as though it had always been there, and the others had simply grown up around it. Its facade was dark brick, ivy-threaded, with a wooden sign hanging above the door that swayed slightly in the night air. Even at this distance, in this light, you could make out the faint outline of a painted flower on it, a rose, or perhaps a peony, its petals worn soft by years of rain and sun. Beneath the sign, a small step led up to a door of dark painted wood, its brass handle gleaming in the candlelight from within. And in the window, filling the window, crowding gently against the glass, were flowers. Not arranged in the careful, formal way of a display made for selling, but placed with the unhurried generosity of someone who simply had many flowers and wanted to share them. Bunches of dried lavender hung from an interior beam, their purple faded to a dusty silver. Roses, deep red, pale cream, the color of old paper, gathered in wide-mouthed clay jugs. Trailing stems of something delicate and feathery arched over the edges of mismatched pots, and behind and between all of it, candles, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, on shelves, on surfaces, on what appeared to be an old piano tucked into a far corner. Their light moved constantly, very gently, so that the whole window appeared to breathe. You stood still for a long moment, looking at it. Then you walked toward the door and you went inside. The bell above the door made a small, gentle sound, not the sharp ring of a shop bell, but something lower, softer, like a note played on a glass harp. And then the smell reached you, and for a moment, you simply stood on the threshold and let it arrive. It came in layers, the way all true and complex things do. The first was the cool, clean scent of damp earth, dark and mineral and honest. The smell of a garden after rain, of roots and clay and the deep patience of growing things. Then, rising beneath it, dried lavender, warm and dusty and sweet. A scent that carried something of summer preserved carefully into autumn. A scent that felt, somehow, like remembering. And beneath that, threaded through everything, the living sweetness of roses. Not the sharp synthetic rose of other places, but the deep, rounded, slightly spiced scent of petals opened in cool air. A scent that was quiet and certain and very old. You stepped fully inside, and the door swung gently closed behind you. The room was small and completely unhurried. The shelves that lined its walls were crowded with everything a florist might need, and a great deal more. Bundles of dried herbs tied with twine, small bottles of tinted water, old books with their spines turned inward, clay pots in every size. The floor was flagstone, worn smooth, with a faded rug laid down the center that had once been red and was now something warmer and more complicated. Candles burned on every available surface, clustered together in groups of 3 and 5 and 7, their flames steady and generous in the still air of the room, casting everything in gold. And the flowers, They were everywhere, in buckets of water, along the floor, in jugs on the counter, in tin pails, hanging from the beams overhead. Roses and dahlias and late chrysanthemums, eucalyptus branches and sprigs of rosemary, bunches of dried poppy heads rattling gently to themselves. The whole room felt like the inside of a garden that had decided to come indoors for winter and found the arrangement entirely agreeable. You heard a sound from somewhere deeper in the shop. A soft, rhythmic snipping, the sound of scissors working through stems, and a moment later, a figure appeared through a curtain of hanging dried flowers at the back of the room. The florist was older, with a face that had settled into a kind of gentle steadiness, the way old wood does, not worn down, but worn into something more itself. She wore an apron over dark wool, its pockets sagging pleasantly with the small tools of her trade, and her hands, when she set down her scissors, were the hands of someone who spent a great deal of time among living things, careful and sure and faintly stained with green. Her gray hair was loosely pinned, several strands having made their way free over the course of the evening, and she did not appear troubled by this. She looked at you with the particular unhurried warmth of someone who is never very surprised to see someone arrive. "Come in out of the mist," she said. Her voice was low and even, the kind that made a room feel smaller in the best possible way, more contained, more sheltered. The evenings have been thick with it lately. October always keeps it close. You said something in reply, something simple, an apology perhaps for the lateness of the hour, or a word of wonder at the shop itself, and she shook her head very slightly, as though apologies were entirely unnecessary here. "There's no late here," she said, moving to the counter with the slow certainty of long habit. "The candles don't know the time, neither do the flowers particularly." She glanced at you, a small warmth at the corners of her eyes. "And neither, I think, do you. Tonight, not really." She was right, you realized. Standing here in the candlelight, surrounded by the scent of roses and the soft, living warmth of 100 small flames, the hour had ceased to matter entirely. The fog pressed against the windows. The city moved on, somewhere far off, in its usual way. But here, inside this narrow room, with its crowded shelves and patient flowers, time had slowed to something very different, to the pace of a candle burning, or a flower opening, or a long, deep breath taken without hurry. You felt your shoulders drop. The florist tilted her head gently toward an old wooden stool beside the counter. Just tilted it, the smallest gesture. And somehow, this was enough. You sat down, and the evening, like a soft blanket pulled to the chin, settled around you. Let your eyes close now, if they haven't already. The candles are burning steadily. The roses are resting in their water. The mist is outside, and you are inside, and there is nowhere at all you need to go. Rest here for a while. The florist is close by, moving quietly among her flowers. You are perfectly safe. You are perfectly warm. Sleep, when it comes, will come gently. Part 2, the candlelit shop. Breathe in slowly. Hold it for just a moment and let it go. You are still here, on the worn wooden stool inside the narrow shop, and the candlelight is still moving. That constant, unhurried movement of flame that asks nothing of you except that you watch it, if you like, or close your eyes if you prefer. Both are equally welcome here. The florist is nearby. The roses are resting. The fog is outside, doing whatever fog does when no one is watching it. There is nowhere else to be. Let the room come into focus around you now. Softly, the way things come clear when your eyes have had a moment to adjust, not all at once, but in pieces, each one a small and quiet gift. The shelves were the first thing you truly noticed when she had been still long enough to see them properly. They ran from floor to ceiling on every wall, built from dark timber that had deepened over the years into the color of strong tea. Their surfaces worn smooth at the edges, where countless hands had reached and rested and reached again. They were full, not cluttered, but generously, thoughtfully full, in the way of a room that has been slowly accumulated rather than deliberately arranged. Every shelf held its own small world. On the lowest ones, closest to the flagstone floor, sat the practical things. Wide-mouthed ceramic crocks in cream and blue, their lids slightly askew. Rolls of brown paper, shallow baskets lined with burlap, holding bulbs wrapped in dry peat. Above these, the shelves grew more varied, glass terrariums of different sizes, their panes fogged softly with the breath of the small, mossy landscapes within. Tiny ferns curling toward the light of the nearest candle, a single sprig of something white and small blooming quietly in the corner of one. Beside them, porcelain vases in shapes that suggested they had each arrived from a different era in a different household. A tall, narrow one painted with blue willow branches, a squat, round one the color of old cream with a crack along its base that had been mended so carefully it was almost invisible. A pair of small ones, identical, each holding a single dried poppy head on a long pale stem. And between all of this, wherever a shelf offered a spare inch of space, there were books. They were old, all of them leather-bound and cloth-bound, and in some cases, bound in something that had once been leather and had since softened into something more ambiguous. Their spines were lettered in gilt that had mostly faded to a warm ghost of itself. The Language of Flowers, a practical herbal, Observations upon the Garden at Kew, Volume 3, on the classification of the rose family. One thick volume lay open, face down as though someone had set it aside mid-page and fully intended to return. You found yourself wondering what sentence they had left unfinished. You tilted your head back very slowly. The ceiling was low and dark-beamed, and from it hung the herbs. They had been gathered into bundles, some thick as a wrist, some barely a handful, and tied with loops of rough twine, then left to dry in the warmth of the shop over what must have been many seasons. Lavender, in its dozens of shades, from deep violet to faded gray. Rosemary, its stiff gray-green spines pointing downward in neat formations. Chamomile, its tiny dried flowers, pale as old paper. Sage and thyme, and something you didn't immediately recognize. Silver-leafed, delicate, with a scent that drifted down when the candles below it moved. Sweet and faintly resinous, like a forest in late summer. The bundles swayed, almost imperceptibly, in the slow, warm currents rising from the candles, and their shadows swayed with them across the beams above, long and softly edged, as unhurried as everything else in this room. The effect of all of it together, the dark shelves, the glass terrariums holding their small green breaths, the books with their faded gilt, the hanging herbs shifting in the warmth, was of being inside something that had been slowly lovingly layered, the way a bird layers a nest. Each edition chosen not for grandeur, but for fitness, for warmth, for the particular way it contributed to a whole that was more comfortable than any single part. You felt with a certainty that required no analysis that you were safe here. The florist had disappeared through the curtain of hanging dried flowers at the back of the shop, and from behind it came sounds you found yourself following easily, without effort. The soft knock of a kettle being lifted, the quiet percussion of a drawer being opened and closed, the small ceramic tap of cups being set onto a tray. The window was small but meticulously clean, and behind the glass could be seen an arrangement of wooden toys, a painted horse with real horsehair for its mane and tail, a mechanical bear that could be made to walk by turning a key in its side, a set of 9 pins, each carved and painted to represent a different character from nursery rhymes, and a Noah's Ark complete with pairs of animals so small and delicate they seemed to have been carved by fairy hands. The toys were arranged with evident care, positioned to catch what light there was, and even in the gray dawn, they possessed a certain quality of life, as if they were only waiting for the proper moment to wake and move about. Above the window, painted on a wooden sign that hung from an iron bracket, were the words, A. Bellamy, maker of fine toys and curiosities. The paint had faded somewhat over the years, but the letters remained clear, and the sign itself, though old, had been maintained with obvious care. It swung very slightly in the morning breeze, producing a faint creaking sound that mingled with the other soft noises of the awakening street. Within the shop, all was still dark. The shutters remained closed, the door locked, the interior wrapped in the particular silence that belongs to places where work is done, but where, for the moment, no work is being undertaken. The darkness held within it the shapes of many things: workbenches and shelves, tools and half-finished projects, toys in various stages of completion, all waiting, patient as the fog, for the day to properly begin. The minutes passed slowly, measured by the distant chiming of church bells. First one bell, then another, then several together, their voices rising through the fog to announce the hour. 6 o'clock. The city was waking, though not yet fully awake. The market sounds grew gradually louder. The rumble of more carts, the calls of vendors beginning to arrange their goods, the general murmur of commerce preparing to commence. And then, from the door that led to the floors above the shop, there came the sound of footsteps on wooden stairs, slow footsteps, careful and measured, descending one step at a time. Each step produced its own particular note. Some stairs creaked, others groaned softly, a few were silent. The footsteps knew these sounds, anticipated them, accepted them as familiar companions. A key turned in a lock somewhere in the darkness, and the door at the bottom of the stairs opened. A figure appeared, barely visible, in the dim light that crept around the edges of the shutters. The figure moved with the deliberate slowness of age, not infirm exactly, but conscious of the body's limitations and unwilling to test them unnecessarily. There was a pause, a moment of stillness, and then the strike of a match. A small sound, sharp and sudden in the quiet. The match flared, and in its brief light, one could see a pair of hands holding it, old hands marked with the signs of long labor, the skin spotted and creased, the fingers slightly gnarled, but still capable. Still, sure. The hands moved the match to a lamp that stood on a small table near the door, and the lamp's wick caught, the flame spreading and steadying until it cast a warm circle of light that pushed back the darkness for several feet in all directions. In that light, more could now be seen. The hands belonged to an elderly man dressed in clothing that spoke of modest circumstances, maintained with care. Dark trousers, a waistcoat of gray cloth, a white shirt with a collar that had been washed many times, and overall, a long brown apron, its pockets sagging with the weight of small tools. The man's face was gentle, deeply lined, with kind eyes that held the particular softness that comes from a lifetime of working with one's hands to create things meant to bring joy to children. This was Mr. Arthur Bellamy, and he had been making toys in this shop for longer than many people had been alive. He was 73 years old, though he rarely thought about his age except when his knees protested the climb up the stairs or his fingers grew stiff on cold mornings. He had been born in this building, had learned his trade from his father in this very workshop, and had continued that work through all the years since, creating wooden horses and painted dolls, mechanical birds and puzzle boxes, tin soldiers and miniature theaters. He stood for a moment, holding the lamp, allowing his eyes to adjust to the light and his mind to adjust to wakefulness. This moment of standing still, of simply being present in the space where he spent his days, was as much a part of his morning ritual as lighting the lamp itself. He looked around the workshop, seeing without needing to focus his attention the familiar shapes, the known locations of tools and materials, the comforting presence of his life's work. The platform stretches away on both sides, its stone flags worn smooth and pale, polished by the passing of 10,000 journeys, into something almost luminous. The gas lamps stand in a long row, each one casting its own small, warm kingdom of amber light, and between each lamp, soft shadows pool and breathe. The shadows do not feel dark here, they feel restful, the way shadows in a beloved room feel restful, familiar, gentle, simply the absence of something that was never needed. To your left and to your right, the locomotives sleep. There are two of them on the near tracks, great iron creatures settled into stillness, their boilers cooling now, ticking very softly in the deep quiet, the way a cast iron stove ticks after the last log has been laid. From one, a long exhalation of pale steam drifts upward and sideways, moving slowly across the lamplight through the cold air, unfurling as it rises until it becomes nothing, or rather, until it becomes part of the air itself, indistinguishable, released. You watch it go. There is no hurry. There is nowhere to be except exactly here. The steam drifts and thins and vanishes. The station holds its breath. Your own breathing, you notice, has grown slower. It seems to have taken its rhythm from the station, from the long, unhurried intervals between sounds, the faint tick of cooling iron, the distant murmur of something, a sleeping pigeon perhaps, shifting in the ironwork far above, the soft groan of a timber somewhere in the old station master's office, the building settling into the night the way old buildings do, flexing and relaxing, breathing in their own patient way. You set your bag down, not because you must, but because it seems right. The bag belongs on the pale stone floor of this platform. At this hour, in this pool of amber lamplight, it has arrived where it was always going. So, perhaps, have you. Or perhaps, he continues with the smallest tilt of his head, good midnight would be more accurate, you find that you are smiling too. I wasn't sure. You hear yourself say, and your own voice sounds softer here. easier, as though this place has already begun to do its quiet work on you. Whether anyone would still be about at this hour, he considers this with the air of someone who has all the time needed to consider anything. The lantern sways very slightly in the draft from some far corner of the station. Someone is always about, he says at last. The station doesn't sleep. Not entirely. It rests. It breathes. There is a difference. He glances down the long platform toward the two great locomotives standing in their quiet repose, the steam still drifting from one in long, slow veils. Like them, engines at rest are not engines stopped. There is still warmth in the iron, still life. He looks back at you. You've had a long journey. It is not a question, but you nod, because it is true, not only of tonight, not only of the miles that brought you to this platform, but of something larger and less easily named, the kind of long that accumulates slowly, the way dust accumulates on a windowsill, until one day you look up and wonder when the light grew so dim. He nods too, as though he understands all of this without needing to hear it. Then you are in exactly the right place, he says simply, and you find, standing here beneath the great iron arch, in the amber lamplight, with the steam drifting slowly upward into the cold and quiet dark, that this is precisely, completely true. A letter lies half finished on the blotter, the pen set beside it with the particular neatness of someone who means to come back. But the armchair by the fire, that is where we are. It is a deep chair, a chair of serious and committed softness, upholstered in a green that was once quite vivid and has since mellowed into something richer and more restful, the color of old moss, of riverbank shadows. The arms are worn at the edges where hands have rested 1,000 times. The cushions have shaped themselves over years and years into something very close to a human form, which means they receive you now with an almost uncanny attentiveness, as though they have been expecting you specifically. Beside the chair, a small table holds a cup of tea. It has been there long enough that the steam rising from it is very gentle now, barely a thread of silver in the warm air, curling and dissolving before it has gone more than a few inches upward. The tea is the color of amber, very dark, the sort of tea that has had time to think. A small spoon rests in the saucer. A single cube of sugar sits beside it, never used. The fireplace is directly opposite. The fire inside it is not a roaring thing. It has moved past that stage of the evening and settled into something more considered, a deep bed of orange and crimson coals beneath a modest flame that leans now one way, now another. As the draft shifts, it makes no great sound, only a low, occasional ticking, and now and then a small collapse of coal that sends a brief cascade of sparks upward into the flue, bright and gone in an instant, like a thought that arrives fully formed and then slips away before it can be caught. The mantelpiece above it is dark marble, and upon it a carriage clock whose ticking is almost imperceptible from the armchair, a small bronze figure of a stag, and 2 candlesticks, unlit, their wax cold and ivory. On either side of the fireplace, bookshelves reach from floor to ceiling. The books upon them are old friends. They are not arranged for show. They are arranged the way books arrange themselves when they are actually read, by association, by feeling, by the obscure logic of a mind that knew exactly why this volume wanted to stand beside that one. Their spines are every shade of brown and green and burgundy, some lettered in gold that has worn to a whisper, some with no lettering at all. And the smell, that particular smell, which is very nearly the smell of the room itself. Old paper and leather, and the faint ghost of pipe tobacco that has seeped so completely into the curtains, and the plaster and the wood, that no amount of airing will ever entirely remove it, nor would anyone wish it to. Beneath that, the dry mineral warmth of the coal fire. Beneath that, something fainter still. Beeswax, perhaps, from the floor polish, or the faint sweetness of the applewood that was added to the grate earlier in the evening and has since burned away entirely, leaving only the memory of its scent drifting among the warmer ones. The curtains at the window are drawn, mostly, not entirely. There is a gap of perhaps 2 inches between them, where they fail to meet at the center. And through this gap, if you were to look, though there is no reason at all to move or turn or do anything but remain exactly as you are, you would see the glass of the window itself, and beyond it, the square, and beyond that, nothing but a darkness that is deepening by the minute. The curtains are heavy velvet. They are the color of dried mulberry, a deep reddish purple that drinks the firelight and gives almost none of it back. They are so thick that when you stand near them, you can feel the cold of the glass radiating from behind them. And yet here, in the chair, that cold is entirely theoretical. Here, there is only warmth. Somewhere very far away, further than the square, further than the street, perhaps as far as the river, a low sound moves through the evening air. A rumble, long and slow and enormous. Not sharp, not violent. The kind of sound that begins before you are quite certain you have heard it and ends after you have already begun to forget it. The sound of something immense shifting in the sky overhead as the very atmosphere of the city turns itself over and prepares. The carriage clock ticks. The fire breathes. And then, just as the last light in the square below fades to nothing, the first drops of rain arrive. Heavy, deliberate drops, each one landing against the thick glass of the study window with a sound like a fingertip pressing gently, asking to be let in. Part 2. The fire is lit and the rain begins in earnest. Stay where you are. There is no need to move, no need to do anything at all, except allow yourself to sink a little deeper into the chair, to feel the soft resistance of it giving way beneath you, degree by degree, the way the last of the evening's tension releases itself, not all at once, but gradually, like a long, slow exhale that you did not know you had been holding. The rain has started. Let that settle over you like a blanket. The rain has started, and it means what it has always meant, that the night has officially closed around this small, warm room, that the boundary between inside and outside has become something total and definitive, that whatever lies beyond these walls and these heavy velvet curtains is now entirely separate from us. We are in here. Everything else is out there. And the rain falls between those two worlds like a curtain of its own. Continuous, unbroken, absolute. Listen to it. In the very first moments, it is arriving in waves, not yet fully steady, still making up its mind about its own rhythm, the way rain does at the very beginning of a long night of rain. A flurry of drops against the glass, then a pause of perhaps 2 seconds, then more. More drops now, heavier ones, the kind that carry real weight, that strike the window not with a tap, but with a press, a fullness, a satisfying and complete sound that lands somewhere behind the sternum and stays there. And now, as you listen, do not try to count the drops. Simply let them arrive. Let them accumulate the way they are accumulating against the glass, each one adding itself to the sound until the sound becomes less like individual drops and more like a continuous texture, a fabric of noise that is somehow both complex and deeply, deeply simple. There is the higher note of the rain striking the glass directly. There is the lower, rounder sound of it hitting the stone ledge of the windowsill. There is the rushing, channeled sound of it finding the drain pipe at the corner of the house and descending in a contained stream. That particular liquid murmur that is steadier and more musical than the rain itself. And beneath all of it, beneath and behind and inside all of it, the cobblestones of the square below are receiving the rain in the way that wet stone receives things, quietly, with a kind of deep absorption, darkening further, sending up the clean and ancient smell of wet London stone that rises even now through the gap in the curtains and mingles with the warmth of the room. But the fire needs attention. In the armchair, we are aware of it. The fire has burned low while the evening gathered itself outside. The coals are still warm, still holding a faint orange at their hearts. But the flame has gone, and the room has begun to feel it. Just at the edges, just enough. The air near the window is the first to cool. It seeps inward, slowly, respectfully, as though it does not wish to intrude. It is time to build the fire up properly. There is something deeply, almost ceremonially satisfying about this, about the act of attending to a fire on a rainy night. It is one of the oldest things a person can do, and the body knows it, even before the mind is caught up. There is a box of kindling on the hearth, thin, dry sticks of wood. Pine, perhaps, split very fine, the palest straw color where they were cut. They have been sitting beside the fire all day and are warm already, warm and dry in the particular way that makes them almost eager. Beside them, a small coal scuttle, and beside that, a brass box whose hinged lid opens on a supply of long matches, the proper kind, the Victorian kind, with a thick red head and a long pale stem of pine. The first match is taken out with care. It is held for a moment, just a moment, between two fingers, the cold, smooth stem of it, the dense little head. Then it is drawn along the side of the brass striker at the edge of the box, a single deliberate stroke, and the sound of it, that brief, decisive rasp, cuts cleanly through the sound of the rain, bright and sharp and immediate, a sound that belongs entirely to this single second and no other. And then the flame. It blooms at the tip of the match with a tiny, surprised hiss, a quick flare of orange and blue that steadies itself within a heartbeat into a small, composed, upright flame. It leans slightly in the draft from the chimney. It casts a circle of warm light no larger than a cupped hand, but that circle of light is enough to illuminate the underside of the mantelpiece, the small bronze stag, the face of the carriage clock. The clock reads 20 minutes past 9. The kindling is placed with patience, not hurriedly, not carelessly. 2 or 3 sticks at first, arranged loosely over the remaining coals, with enough space between them for the air to move freely. The match is lowered to the driest, finest pieces, and the flame touches them with a kind of gentleness. For a moment, nothing. Hello, I'm Oliver, and welcome back to Sleepy Shelf. Is the freezing wind of a long day still howling in your mind? Step out of the blinding snowstorm and let the heavy log cabin door close firmly behind you. Shut the winter out. Take a slow, deep breath. Fill your lungs with the sweet, heavy scent of melting beeswax, dried lavender, and a warm wood fire. Listen to the thick logs crackling in the stone hearth and the muffled, distant howl of the blizzard outside. You are safe from the cold now. Just close your eyes and let the warmth pull you into sleep. Part 1. The White Storm. Close your eyes now. Let your body sink a little deeper into wherever you are resting. Feel the weight of the day begin to lift slowly, like snow falling upward into a darkening sky. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be. Only here, only this. Let me take you somewhere warm. It is winter. Deep, true winter. The kind that does not apologize for itself. The forest stretches in every direction, ancient and enormous, its bare black trees rising like cathedral columns into a sky that has forgotten it was ever blue. The branches are weighted with snow, bowed low and patient, and between them the darkness is so complete, so soft and total, that the edges of things have all but disappeared. There is no horizon. There is no path you can clearly see. There is only the white ground beneath your boots and the white air swirling before your face and the slow, steady rhythm of your own breathing, keeping time in the dark. You have been walking for a long while. Your coat is heavy, a good Victorian wool coat, thick and long, with deep pockets that your gloved hands press into for warmth. Your scarf is wound twice about your neck and chin, and still the cold finds its way to the tip of your nose, to the small exposed triangle of your cheeks. Each breath you draw comes in cool and leaves as a small pale cloud, drifting away behind you, dissolving into nothing. Your boots press down through the snow with a slow, satisfying crunch. One step, and then another, and then another. The only sound you can fully trust in all this white silence. Wood smoke, you breathe in again, slowly, carefully, as though the scent might be startled away. And yes, there it is, rich and dark and familiar, the unmistakable smell of good wood burning low in a deep hearth, oak, perhaps, or apple wood, carrying that faint sweetness that only real wood holds. Your chest loosens around it. Something in your shoulders, some tightness you had not noticed carrying, eases very slightly. And beneath the wood smoke, something else again. Something stranger and sweeter, golden and floral and ancient, the way a memory from childhood sometimes surfaces without warning from somewhere you had forgotten entirely. Honey, warm honey, and beeswax, and something faintly herbal beneath it. Lavender, perhaps, or dried thyme, the scent of a place that has been lived in gently and for a very long time. The scent of care. You turn toward it. The smell is faint, directional, carried on a brief lull between gusts. Your boots find their rhythm again, and you move through the trees, following nothing more solid than a scent, trusting the way animals trust, completely and without analysis. The forest thins slightly, and then, between two enormous snow-draped pines, you see it. A light, not cold light, not the blue-white light of moon on snow, or the sharp flicker of something uncertain. This light is amber, deep, rich, golden amber, the color of honey held up to the sun, the color of candle flame seen through thick old glass. It pulses very slightly, alive the way only firelight is truly alive. And It comes from two low, broad windows set into something dark and solid and immovable in the white, swirling chaos of the storm. You take 3 more steps. The cottage emerges from the snowfall the way certainties sometimes emerge from confusion, gradually and then all at once. It is a low, stout building, built from logs so thick and dark with age that they seem to have grown here rather than been placed. The roof is buried under 1.5 feet of snow, the eaves hanging low and heavy, and from the wide stone chimney at the far end, a column of pale wood smoke rises and is immediately torn sideways by the wind. Neat stacks of split firewood run the length of one wall, sheltered beneath a low wooden overhang, and even from here, you can see the reassuring abundance of it. Enough wood for many weeks of deep winter. Enough for a long, unhurried stay. The windows glow. You stand and look at them for a moment. Just a moment before walking forward. Through the thick, slightly wavy glass, the light shifts and breathes in that slow, irregular way that only a real fire makes, and the amber of it falls across the snow outside in warm pools that seem almost to push the darkness back. A shadow moves inside, slow, unhurried, someone crossing the room with the steady ease of a person at home in their own warmth. You walk to the door. It is a massive thing, heavy planked oak, iron hinged, with a handle worn smooth by generations of hands. You stand before it for one moment, the wind screaming now behind you, flinging needles of ice against the back of your neck, pressing at you as though trying to reclaim you for the cold. You lift the latch. The door opens on a breath of heat so immediate and complete that for a second you cannot move. Warm air pouring out to meet you, scented with wood smoke and honey, and something baking slowly, deeply. Something sweet and starchy and impossibly comforting. The light washes over the snow at your feet in a wide golden fan. You step inside, you turn, and you close the door. Part 2, the golden hearth. Stay here with me a little longer. Let the weight of your body settle further into the warmth. Notice how your breathing has already begun to slow. Just a little, just enough. Let it slow a little more. There is no rush inside these walls. Time moves differently here. It moves the way honey moves, thick and golden, and in no particular hurry to be anywhere at all. You are still standing just inside the door, and now, at last, you allow yourself to look. The room is not large. That is the first thing you understand about it, and the understanding is immediately, profoundly. It is the size of a room that can be fully known, a room without hidden distances or cold, unlit corners, a room that holds its warmth because it has been built with the specific intention of holding it. The ceiling is low, crossed by 3 great beams of dark timber, each one smoothed and burnished by decades of firelight and wood smoke, until they glow faintly amber along their lower edges. The walls are the same aged log as the exterior, fitted so closely together that no draft could find its way between them, and over the years, they have taken on a deep, warm color, the color of strong tea, of dark caramel, of the inside of something old and well-loved and completely at rest. The floor beneath your boots is wide planked oak, worn smooth and dark in the paths between furniture, lighter in the places less traveled. It is the floor of a room that has been lived in faithfully, and it creaks very softly, just once, beneath your first tentative step inward. but the fireplace. The fireplace commands the far wall entirely. It is a massive thing, built from river stone, rounded and gray, and fitted together with a precision that speaks of a craftsman who understood that a fireplace is not merely functional, but is the very soul of a room. The mantelpiece above it is a single slab of dark oak, broad as a man's outstretched arms, and along it sit a row of quiet objects. A few beeswax candles burn to soft, generous pools of wax. A dark glass jar holding a spray of dried lavender. A small wooden clock whose tick is so slow and steady it has long since merged with the silence. The firebox itself is enormous, deep-set and generous, and inside it 3 great logs burn with the unhurried confidence of things that have been alight for many hours and intend to remain so for many more. The flames are not frantic. They are tall and low at once, deep orange at their base, where the coals glow with that particular ferocious red that good dry hardwood makes, shifting upward through amber and pale gold to the faintest blue at their very tips, where the heat is so complete it becomes almost invisible. They move together in a slow, collaborative rhythm, leaning slightly, swaying, folding against one another, separating. Watching them is like watching something breathe. The heat that radiates from this fireplace is not the sharp, aggressive heat of something newly lit. It is a settled, heavy, ancient heat, the kind that has had time to sink into the stone and the mortar and the floor itself, so that the warmth comes not only from the flames before you, but from the very room around you. It crosses the floorboards in long, invisible waves and finds you where you stand, pressing against your cold cheeks, your cold hands, the tip of your nose. You feel it on your eyelids. You feel it in your sternum, loosening something there that the cold had quietly tightened without your noticing. The air, you breathe it in now, slowly, all the way down. The crackle of it is not sharp or startling. It is the low, intimate sound of dry wood, settling and breathing and giving itself over to the heat. A patient, self-contained sound with no sharp edges. Occasionally, a lob shifts with a deep, muffled thud, and the flames lean briefly, brighten, and then settle back into their long, unhurried conversation. Sparks rise once in a while, small, bright, brief, and vanish against the dark stone of the chimney before they become anything more than a fleeting, pretty interruption. From very far away, from another world truly, from a world that exists now only vaguely and without much relevance, the storm moans against the outer walls. You hear it as you might hear something from the edge of sleep, registered, acknowledged, and immediately, gently released. The walls of this cottage are too thick, the fire too steady, the warmth too complete and settled for the sound to carry any of its former menace. It is simply weather. It is simply outside, and you are simply not. The beekeeper has settled back into their own chair, unhurried, at ease, one hand resting on the armrest, their eyes on the fire. They do not demand conversation. They do not require anything of you at all. Their presence beside you is simply the presence of another warm, calm living thing in a warm, calm room. And it is, you find, exactly enough. Exactly and completely enough. Let your eyes grow heavy now. The fire breathes. The wind is far away. The beeswax candles glow along the mantelpiece, each one steady and small and golden. and their light falls across the dark walls and the low ceiling in warm, overlapping pools that shift almost imperceptibly as the flames move. You do not need to do anything. You do not need to think of anything. Only the fire, only the warmth pressing into your lap and your hands, and the heavy, welcome weight of your resting body in this deep, soft chair. The beekeeper stirs the fire once, a slow, practiced motion, and the room brightens briefly, gently, before settling again into its long amber quiet. Part 3 waits for you, but there is no hurry. None at all. Rest. He disappeared somewhere behind the curve of the shelving, and for a moment there was only the sound of him. The soft step on the stone floor, a muffled sound of cloth, a faint metallic note from somewhere, and then the particular sound of liquid being poured, a warm, dark sound. Low and steady and brief. He returned carrying a mug. It was a heavy thing, thick-walled pottery, the color of earth. Its handle broad enough for both hands if you wished. Steam rose from it in a slow, unhurried column that caught the amber light and dispersed into the warm air above. He held it out, and the traveler took it, and the mug's warmth transferred immediately to the palms and the curled fingers in the inner wrists, a warmth that was different from the oven's warmth, more personal, more direct, like something given rather than simply present. The smell reached upward, chamomile first, soft, familiar, carrying the memory of meadows and long summer light, and something deeply, primally restful. Beneath it, honey, real honey, stirred in generously, giving the steam a sweetness that was almost visible, and woven through both, so gently it was felt rather than identified. The faintest ghost of something spiced, not sharp, not insistent, just a warmth within the warmth, a depth beneath the depth, like a low note beneath a melody. The traveler wrapped both hands around the mug. The baker said nothing, simply moved away again, back toward his counter, back toward the dough, back toward the patient rhythmic work that the night required of him. The sound of him returned a moment later. The soft brush of flour on wood, unhurried, steady, the sound of a man entirely content with where he was and what he was doing, making no demands of the room, asking nothing of it except to remain exactly as it was. Then the blanket. The baker came once more from behind the shelves, this time carrying something folded over one arm, something thick and slightly rough textured and dark colored in the amber light. Wool. Dense, tightly woven wool, heavy enough to have substance in the hand. Heavy enough that when the baker shook it open and settled it across the traveler's shoulders, it arrived with a weight that was immediate and intentional. A weight that pressed down across the upper back and the shoulder blades and the back of the arms, like a second pair of hands placed there with great gentleness. There, the baker said, just that. The traveler pulled the blanket forward with one hand, the mug held in the other, and drew it closed across the front. And the heat that had been gathering in the chair and the room and the very stones of the oven was now also trapped, held close, contained in the small warm pocket of air between the wool and the body. The cold had been retreating for some time, but this was the moment it finally conceded entirely. It did not go dramatically. It went the way the last light of evening goes, gradually and then completely, and in a way that was so smooth and so complete that it was difficult afterward to say exactly when the transition had occurred. One moment the cold was still present somewhere in the deep places, in the marrow, in the long bones of the legs, in the back of the neck where the wind had found it easiest to enter. And then it was simply not. The warmth had moved through those places, had moved with the unhurried confidence of something that knows it will win. And the cold had dissolved into it and was gone. The traveler felt it in layers. The hands first wrapped around the warm mug, the feeling returning to the fingertips in a slow tide, a soft tingling that was not quite sensation and not quite the absence of it, something in between, something on the gentle border between numb and alive. Then the forearms, the shoulders, the chest, a deep releasing of whatever the muscles had been holding, whatever braced and contracted arrangements they had made with the cold, all of it softening now, easing, sinking downward into the deep cushioned chair like something heavy put carefully to rest. The legs last, always the legs last, after a long cold walk, the thighs especially, the long muscles of them that had been working for hours and were now asked to do nothing at all, only to exist in the warmth and to let go. They did, slowly. The tiredness in them was not unpleasant. It was the tiredness of something used well, something that had carried its load faithfully and was now being thanked. The mug was warm against the palms. The traveler lifted it slowly with both hands and drank. The first sip moved down the throat in a warm line, honey sweet and soft, and the chamomile opened somewhere in the chest, some quality of it, some old botanical quiet that the body recognized without knowing why, the way the body sometimes recognizes things that happened before memory. The warmth of the liquid joined the warmth of the room and the warmth of the blanket, and they became indistinguishable from one another. All of it one continuous warmth. All of it surrounding and pervading and holding. The oven breathed. That was the only word for it. Breathed. The heat moved from it in slow, heavy waves, not pulsing quickly but rolling, the way deep water rolls, the way the tide moves, large, slow movements of warm air that reached the chair and the traveler in it and pressed gently, pressed and receded, and pressed again. Each wave arrived like a hand laid flat and warm against the face and held there briefly, and when it receded, it took something with it, some small remaining tension, some last held fragment of the cold night, and when the next wave came, there was less to take, and less and less. The eyelids grew heavy, not all at once. The weight came gradually, the way all the best things come, in increments too small to resist, each one reasonable on its own, accumulating without announcement into something large and gentle and irresistible. The amber light of the fire blurred softly at the edges. The sound of the baker's hands on the floured block moved further away, or seemed to, not disappearing, but becoming more like something dreamed than something heard, still present, still steady, still the faithful heartbeat of the room. The mug rested against the chest. Both hands still held it, but loosely now, cradling rather than gripping, the warmth passing between the pottery and the palms in a slow, undemanding exchange. The blanket was very heavy, not uncomfortably so, heavily in the way of something that wants to help, that is pressing down not to constrain, but to reassure, to say, you are here, you are held, there is no need to hold yourself. The wool was slightly rough against the chin where it had been drawn up, and that small roughness was itself a comfort, a texture, a realness, evidence of the solidity of the world just at the moment when the world was beginning very gently to become less solid. The fire crackled once, a single, soft note like a word spoken in a language that had no other words, only that one, and that one was enough. The traveler's eyes closed, not with effort, not with decision, simply closed. The way a flower closes in the evening, not because it must, not from duty or exhaustion, but because the light has changed and the time for opening has passed, and there is nothing left to do now but rest, quietly and completely. Inside the warmth, the baker worked on. Press, turn, fold. The oven breathed. The snow fell on the lane outside, soft and silent and endlessly patient, covering the world in white. Let the warmth hold you now. Your hands are warm. Your shoulders are still. There is nothing here that needs you to be awake. Then, after a moment, the deeper sound of water being poured, and a smell that threaded itself through the lavender and rose and damp earth already filling the room. The warm, bergamot-edged scent of Earl Grey, and beneath it, lighter and softer, the dry sweetness of chamomile. She came back through the curtain, carrying a tray with the careful, practiced ease of someone who had carried many trays across many evenings. On it sat a brown teapot with a small chip on its lid and a worn cozy pulled over it, 2 cups of mismatched china, a small jug of milk, and a dish holding 2 pieces of shortbread wrapped in a square of cloth. She set it on the low surface near the stove, a cast iron thing tucked into the corner of the room, small and dark and gently radiating a heat that reached you from several feet away, a heat that settled against your face and hands like a kindness. Earl Grey, she said, pouring, with chamomile dried from last summer's garden. It's good for evenings that have gone on a long time. She handed you your cup without asking how you took it, and somehow it was exactly right. Warm in your hands, not too strong, with just enough milk to soften its color to something between amber and gold. You wrapped both hands around it and held it. The village was small, and in its smallness, it was complete. From somewhere behind and above, from the direction of the main lane it seemed, though the mist made direction uncertain, came a sound, low and rhythmic, growing gradually, then peaking, then receding, the sound of hooves on cobblestone. The traveler stopped. Through the mist, a shape resolved, a horse-drawn mail carriage, moving at a steady walk, its lamps lit and swinging softly with each step of the horse. It was a beautiful thing, dark lacquered wood, iron-rimmed wheels turning with a low hum over the stones, a stack of leather satchels roped to the luggage board at the back. The horse was a gray, heavy-set and calm, its breath coming in slow plumes in the cool air. The driver sat high on the box, bundled in a coat of dark wool, a hat pulled low. He did not hurry. He did not need to. The horse knew its route, and the route was the route it had always been, and there was no urgency in any of it. The carriage passed. The sound of hooves faded into the mist. Slow, slow, slower, like the ticking of a clock winding down, until there was nothing left of it but the echo. And then not even that, just the trees again, whispering, just the cool air, just the soft, damp quiet of a village settling into evening. And then the traveler saw the light. It fell from a window, not a large window, but a generous one, its glass slightly uneven in the way of old glass, so that the light that came through it moved a little, shimmered a little, as if alive. The light was amber, not yellow, not orange, but that particular amber that comes from oil lamps with good wicks and warm glass, a color that seems to contain within it some memory of fire and warmth and long evenings indoors. It fell onto the cobblestones in a long, soft rectangle, and the damp stones caught it and held it, gleaming. Above the door, a sign hung from a short iron bracket, swinging very gently in the evening air. The sign was wooden, old wood, painted and repainted many times over, so that the layers showed at the edges, and upon it, in careful gold lettering that had faded just enough to feel entirely right, were the words Whispering Gate Post Office, and below that, Est, 1847. The sign swung. It made no sound. The traveler stood for a moment on the cobblestones, looking at the door. It was a good door, a proper door, with a brass handle worn smooth by generations of hands, and a small window in its upper half through which the amber light fell in a warm rectangle onto the step outside. The step itself was stone, slightly hollowed in the center from long use, and that hollow seemed to the traveler perhaps fanciful, perhaps not, like a kind of welcome, like the place where welcome lives, worn into the world by repetition. A breath, a step forward. The door opened with a sound that was barely a sound at all, just the soft compression of warm air against cool, the faint whisper of old hinges, the quietest possible announcement of an arrival. Inside, the world changed. It changed slowly, the way warmth changes things. Gradually, from the outside in, the cold of the evening fell away first from the face, then from the hands, then from the chest, until the whole body had adjusted and settled into the ambient warmth of the room the way a stone settles into riverbed. The room was not large, but it was full. Floor to ceiling on the left-hand wall ran wooden pigeonholes, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, arranged in a grid so precise and yet so gently aged that they seemed to have grown there rather than been constructed. Each pigeonhole was a small dark square of shadow, and in each shadow nested letters, folded paper and sealed envelopes, fat parcels and thin notes, everything waiting with the particular patience of correspondence. On the right, shelves bore their own orderly burdens, leather-bound books with labels on their spines, stacks of brown parcel paper tied with twine, brass instruments of measurement and impression, bottles of ink in dark glass, a set of scales, a rack of rubber stamps, everything in its place, everything tended. The scent of the room was extraordinary. It was the smell of old paper, not musty, not stale, but rich and dry, the way antique bookshops smell, the way the inside of a cedar chest smells, with something deeper beneath it, leather, much used and well-conditioned, wood smoke from the small fireplace in the corner, where a fire had been going long enough to have settled into contentment, and something else, fainter. That might have been wax, or might have been ink, or might simply have been the accumulated history of 1,000 letters passing through this room. Over more than a century, the traveler breathed it in. Behind the long wooden counter, bent over a stack of envelopes, arranged in careful rows, was a man. He was elderly, not frail, but properly old, the kind of old that carries its weight easily, that has learned over many decades not to hurry and has found that unhurrying suits it well. He wore a woolen vest over a white shirt, the vest a rich navy with small buttons that caught the lamplight. His spectacles sat slightly low on his nose, not slipping, but settled there as if they had found their position long ago and saw no reason to move. His hair was white and combed, his hands steady and precise over the envelopes. He was sorting. Not quickly. There was no speed in what he did, only accuracy. He would take an envelope from the stack, hold it a moment, read the address with the attention of someone who genuinely cared where it was going, and then place it with soft finality into the correct pigeonhole behind him. The sound this made, the dry whisper of paper against wood, was repeated every few seconds, steadily, like the clicking of the clock on the mantelpiece. Above the fire, he looked up. His eyes behind the spectacles were a warm gray blue, the color of the sky on a morning when the weather cannot quite decide. They carried without effort the unmistakable expression of a person who is genuinely glad to see another person. "Ah," he said, "just that," quietly, as if the traveler's arrival had been not unexpected, not exactly, but simply right, as if the evening had been waiting for this moment and was now settling into its proper shape. "You'll have come a long way," he said. It was not quite a question. "I have," said the traveler. The postmaster nodded, the way people nod when a thing confirms what they already suspected, and set down his envelope with the same careful deliberateness with which he had been handling all the others. "Well," he said, "you're here now." And somewhere in the warmth of that small room, in the amber light and the scent of old paper and the soft ticking of the clock and the muffled whispering of the ancient trees outside, the traveler felt, with a certainty as quiet and complete as the village itself, that this was entirely true. Here, and arrived, and safe. Outside, the mist deepened. The village of Whispering Gate settled into the long, gentle dark of a perfect evening, and the fire in the corner of the post office crackled once, softly, and burned on. Part 2, inside the old post office, the postmaster moved the way water moves through a calm place, not slowly exactly, but without any of the small urgencies that most movement carries. No sharp turns, no sudden reaches, every gesture completed before the next one began, as if each motion were a sentence that deserved its own full stop before the next was started. He came around from behind the counter with a quietness that the old floorboards accommodated entirely. They did not creak beneath him, or if they did, it was a creak so familiar and so expected that it had long since become part of the room's natural breath, as unremarkable as the ticking of the clock or the low voice of the fire. "Come in properly," he said. "Close the door behind you. The village air is lovely, but it has a way of following you in if you let it linger." The traveler closed the door. The latch settled into its housing with a sound like a word said quietly at the end of a long sentence, a sound of completion, of closure, of there. The room was even warmer now that the door was shut. The warmth was not the aggressive warmth of a room overheated, but the patient warmth of a space that had been tended carefully over many hours, built up gradually from the fireplace in the corner until it had reached this precise enveloping temperature, the temperature the traveler thought of a room that has been lived in with intention. The shelves, seen properly now, were extraordinary. They ran from floor to ceiling along the back wall and the wall to the right of the door, broken only by the counter and the fireplace, and two narrow windows whose glass had the old slightly wavy quality that made the lamplight inside look liquid. The shelves were oak, dark oak, aged to the color of strong tea, and upon them, in an order that was immediately legible even if its exact logic was not, rested the accumulated correspondence and materials of a very long operation.